Welcome to AP Euro for Winners.
We are continuing talking about Unit 5. Last time we talked about Napoleon's rise, dominance, and defeat. And now that he's been defeated, let's look at the Congress of Vienna.
So, a little bit of context for the Congress of Vienna. We know, first of all, we got to talk about this idea of the balance of power. So, we know from the Peace of Westphalia, this is going back pretty far, but right, the Peace of Westphalia was the last kind of religious war. Remember in that war, the 30 Years' War, it starts as a religious war, ends as a political war. Right? So the Peace of Westphalia is an end to religion being the primary reason that Europe is going to go to war. And after the Peace of Westphalia, Europe is now going to war to maintain balance of power, or in like Napoleon's sake, to try to gain more power. So it's all about political power now, right? The thought that no one state should be more power than the others. So that's like far, far away context, but we now know it's kind of about balance of power. Now, thinking about the last lesson, we know that Napoleon is being exiled in various places, and Europe has to basically clean up the mess that is left, which is how we're going to get into the Congress of Vienna, which is their attempt to clean it up, right? Because Napoleon had disrupted the balance of power. And we're going to get this group called the Quadruple Alliance, which is Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Great Britain. And 1 year before Napoleon's defeated at Waterloo. So remember, like in the last video, Napoleon had kind of abdicated the throne. He had been exiled to that Mediterranean island. So they start this work at the Congress of Vienna but then Napoleon kind of comes back for a hot second in Waterloo, but he's quickly defeated. They finish the work after Waterloo. Okay, so they kind of get interrupted a little bit by Napoleon's return, but they finish it afterwards in 1815. And 1815 is a very important year to know for AP Euro. Okay, it's a huge turning point in this year and how we move from Napoleon's dominance and we're moving. The Congress of Vienna is like a big swing to how politics is going to go after that.
All right, so let's look at what it is. So again, the Quadruple Alliance, they want conservative measures. Napoleon had just come in and disrupted everything. And when that happens in history, people like to go back to stability and what they're used to. So that's why. They wanted tradition. They wanted inherited structures. They just didn't want any chaos. So liberal forms in France with the French Revolution were just too much for people. It just caused a decade of chaos, and they had had enough. So conservative rulers tried to roll back liberal reforms that came out of the French Revolution. So going back to things like the aristocracy, the nobles, the church, monarchy, and to the kind of the average person in Europe, those ideas didn't seem so bad anymore, having just witnessed what happened within France and the results of that. So the Congress of Vienna wants to reestablish the balance of power that was just completely upended. They even invited France to the table, which is pretty cool. Europe benefited from a slightly strong France, right? They don't want an insanely powerful Napoleon France, but they didn't want it to be nothing either.
Right, because if France got just totally taken over by this, well, who gets that, right? That's going to create another imbalance of power.
Exactly. And Belgium and Holland are going to be united under the Dutch monarchy, and we'll get into the Dutch a little bit later. And they're strong enough force to oppose French aggression, which is nice, a little bit of balance of power there, and a little bit of paranoia as well about France. And Prussia gets territory on France's eastern border. So let's continue.
Right, so we see there's a little bit of punishment for France, but not too much. And then there's an important figure that we need to know. His name is Clemens von Metternich. Okay, he is a conservative, and he is someone who's orchestrating the Congress of Vienna. So he's kind of the main player here, making all these things happen. Okay, so we got to know this name Metternich. All right, now within the Congress of Vienna, like we just talked about, France gets its borders pushed back a little bit. Definitely less than when it was under Napoleon, but it's not back that much. Okay, it's kind of like where it was at the French Revolution. So, like we said, during all of this, Napoleon had escaped, tried to come back, and when he comes back, the Congress of Vienna does, after Waterloo, take a little bit more power from France. But again, France is still a dominant, powerful country. They're just not Napoleon powerful. And so this is the Congress of Vienna. This is what it creates is a more stable Europe. And that's the main thing we got to get out of this is that by not punishing France too much and by uniting the Dutch and by giving Prussia some more land and by creating these stable places that can check each other in power, we're going to see 50 years of peace. And this is known as the Age of Metternich. And this is some of the longest time of peace in European history. Okay, we'll see some after World War II, but this is a very long time period where there are not major wars in Europe, and that's all because of the Congress of Vienna, and that's all because of Metternich.
I want to bring up a side point here that it's important to know that Congress of Vienna invited France to the table, because we'll see later on in history and in this course, there's a couple instances where the person involved that they wanted to just talk about and kind of quote unquote punish isn't actually invited, and we're going to see that have a massive ripple effect into it. So we think of things like the Berlin Conference with imperialism. No African nation was invited. That didn't end very well for them because eventually they're going to get independence and wars. We see Germany not be invited to the Treaty of Versailles after World War I, which directly causes World War II. Right? A lot of times, if you don't invite the person that you're trying to punish, it doesn't end well. But this one, with the age of Metternich, it really does.
So these are just a couple of maps just to show you how big the swing is with the Congress of Vienna. So in 1812, at the height of Napoleon's power, essentially everything outlined here in red is under Napoleon. Now we saw in the last video how Napoleon goes into Russia, kind of has to retreat, not so great, but look how much France had owned. And then now, 1815, 3 years later, this is now after the Congress of Vienna, what Europe looks like, right? So this is going to look a lot more like what Europe is going to look like today. I mean, what Europe's going to look like for the next 50 years. We're going to see some reorganization of some states with Germany and stuff like that. We'll get into that. But you see, a lot of our places are more like what we'll see today. And there's not one place that's too dominant. There's a balance of power.
And it is kind of interesting to see that Germany and Italy just aren't even a country yet, right? Look at these regions.
But they'll get there. We'll get there. We'll talk about it.
Here is the historical development from College Board. Thank you all for watching. Shout out to our AP Euro students. You're the best. And we'll see you for the next video on a completely different topic of Romanticism.
Until then, bye.